Rachel Cortez stepped onto the cracked asphalt of Camp Lejeune wearing combat boots held together by duct tape and determination. Her faded olive t-shirt hung loose on her slender frame, and her auburn hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail with no attempt at style. At 34, she looked nothing like the polished officers who strode across the base in their immaculate uniforms. She hadn't been on a military installation in nearly 6 years, not since the day she'd handed in her resignation and walked away from the only career she'd ever wanted. Today, she was here as a civilian consultant, accompanying her colleague Mark Davidson, a military technology specialist who'd invited her to observe a new combat simulation program. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Camp Lejeune wasn't just any Marine Corps base. This particular section housed the Special Training Division, where elite units prepared for the most dangerous missions across the globe. Everything about the place radiated prestige and excellence: cutting-edge simulation rooms, specialized combat training facilities, and tactical gear worth more than most civilian cars. The Marines who trained here were the best of the best, their uniforms pristine, their posture perfect, and their confidence unmistakable. Rachel carried only a weathered leather messenger bag containing a notebook and a stainless steel water bottle. She walked with a quiet, measured pace, her eyes instinctively scanning the compound, noting security positions, entrance points, and tactical vulnerabilities. Old habits never truly disappeared, they just waited beneath the surface. The stairs began immediately. A group of Marines standing near the simulation building turned as she approached. One of them, a tall man with a perfectly trimmed haircut, pushed his tactical sunglasses up on his forehead and smirked. "Looks like someone took a wrong turn at the visitor center," he said, loud enough for his companions to hear. A woman in crisp digital camo added, "Those boots have seen more action than most war memorials. Think she found them at a surplus store?" The looks weren't merely curious. They were dismissive, calculated, cold. To them, Rachel was an outsider, unranked, unwelcome, insignificant. They had no concept that the woman they were mocking would soon become the most important person any of them would encounter. Rachel didn't respond to their comments. She simply stood there, quiet and composed, watching the activity around her. And they watched her back, judging her, measuring her, and ultimately underestimating her capabilities. The morning sun climbed higher as Rachel positioned herself near the edge of the training grounds. Her worn boots had settled into the dusty earth, but she remained motionless, observing the controlled chaos of elite training. At the center of the field, Lieutenant Jessica Winters commanded attention effortlessly. Her platinum blonde hair was pulled into a perfect bun, and her uniform bore the distinctive insignia of a family with generations of military service. She embodied everything the Special Training Division represented: connected, confident, and completely convinced of her superiority. Jessica hadn't acknowledged Rachel initially, but a smirk formed on her face when she finally noticed the outsider. She turned to her circle of fellow officers, her voice deliberately carrying across the field. "Did someone bring their housekeeper to work today? This is a restricted military zone, not a public park." The laughter erupted immediately, sharp and mocking. A Marine standing nearby chimed in, "Maybe she's doing research for a documentary, Life Among the Warriors, a Civilian's Perspective." Rachel's expression never changed. She'd endured far worse than juvenile mockery in her time, but something cold settled in her chest as Jessica approached, boots crunching on the gravel between them. "You lost, hon?" Jessica's tone sharpened as she drew closer. "This area requires proper clearance and identification." Rachel's gaze remained steady, unflinching. Jessica's eyes traveled down to Rachel's battered boots, taking in the worn leather and frayed laces with obvious disdain. "That's precious." Jessica stepped closer, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. "Let me guess. Trying to relive your ROTC days? Playing soldier for the afternoon?" Several instructors nearby exchanged glances but remained silent. One junior officer even snickered, encouraging Jessica to continue her performance. Without hesitation, Jessica picked up a nearby water canteen and accidentally spilled water directly onto Rachel's boots. The liquid soaked through immediately, darkening the already worn leather. "Oops," Jessica said, tilting her head with exaggerated innocence. "I was just trying to put out a fire. Those boots look like they've been through hell." The training ground erupted in laughter. Someone whistled. Another Marine tossed a practice grenade that landed at Rachel's feet with a thud. "Fire in the hole, civilian," he called out mockingly. Rachel didn't flinch. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was unnerving. It absorbed their mockery like armor, giving nothing back, revealing nothing. But behind those calm eyes, Rachel was cataloging everything. The hierarchy, the arrogance, the complete lack of discipline disguised as elite training. She'd seen real Marines, real combat, real leadership. This wasn't it. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Her silence only fueled their boldness. What had begun as casual mockery was evolving into something more targeted, more deliberate. A stocky Marine approached with his phone raised, recording. "State your name for the record," he said with a smirk. "We want to remember who wandered in here today." Jessica nodded toward the command building. "Let's speed this up. Someone should call security. Isn't this a breach of protocol?" Across the field, a uniformed officer began walking over. His name tag read Martinez, and his uniform was impeccable, crisp enough to stand on its own. He didn't ask questions or investigate. He simply pointed toward the gate. "This section is for authorized personnel only," he announced firmly. "Please return to the visitor area immediately." Rachel looked at him for just a moment, then nodded. She turned slowly and began walking away, her damp boots leaving dark impressions in the dust. The field buzzed with triumph as she retreated. "She actually left," someone whispered. Another Marine laughed. "I guess even civilians know when they're outranked." But then Commander William Reynolds appeared, a man whose voice could silence rooms and whose presence demanded immediate respect. At 54, he'd served in 3 conflicts and led hundreds of Marines into and out of danger. "Ma'am," his voice cut through the laughter like a blade, "this facility operates under strict authorization protocols. You are not listed on today's access roster." Rachel turned to face him, meeting his stern gaze with that same unshakable calm. She didn't defend herself or appear surprised. She simply stood there, her soaked boots dark against the sun-baked ground. Jessica stepped forward, practically glowing with vindication. "She's been loitering and observing restricted training, sir." "That's a security violation, correct, Commander?" Several Marines had their phones out now, capturing what they perceived as a victory. One whispered to another, "This is gold," posting this with the caption, "Civilian gets reality check." Reynolds' expression remained neutral, but his tone grew sharper. "You need to leave the training area immediately." Rachel didn't flinch. She adjusted the strap of her messenger bag and said quietly, "I understand, sir." Jessica gave a theatrical wave. "Exits that way, sweetie. Thanks for visiting Camp Lejeune. Don't forget to rate us 5 stars on your way out." The laughter spread across the training ground. Mock salutes, slow clapping, sarcastic comments, as Rachel began her long walk toward the gate. But something had shifted. A few Marines lowered their phones mid-recording, their expressions suddenly uncertain. The mood wasn't entirely triumphant anymore. There was something unsettling about Rachel's composure, her complete lack of defensive behavior. Who walks away that calmly from public humiliation? Who absorbs that much mockery without a single word of protest? As Rachel disappeared through the gate, an uneasy quiet settled over parts of the training ground. Not enough to stop the celebration entirely, but enough to plant seeds of doubt. They should have paid attention to that doubt, because everything was about to change. The sky darkened over Camp Lejeune just after lunch. Without warning, the alarm pierced the air, sharp, urgent, followed by flashing lights across the compound. "Scenario Delta is now live," crackled the announcement system. "All units report to Sector 7. Hostage extraction simulation with hostile elements. This is not a drill." Marines scrambled, grabbing gear and checking weapons. Each team had exactly 8 minutes to deploy to the Urban Combat Simulation Zone, a sprawling mock city designed to replicate the most dangerous environments in the world. Jessica Winters was assigned as Operation Lead, her voice cutting through the main radio channel with clipped authority. "Team Alpha secure the perimeter. Team Bravo establish overwatch positions. Team Charlie with me for primary extraction." But within minutes, everything was falling apart. Their intelligence was wrong. The building layouts didn't match their maps. One squad went radio silent after taking a wrong turn into a simulated ambush. Another team reported being pinned down with multiple simulated casualties. Inside the complex urban maze, chaos spread like wildfire. A team got trapped on a rooftop with no viable extraction path. Another tried to secure a building and triggered simulation explosives that killed half their members. Marines shouted over each other, their expensive radio equipment crackling with static and confusion. Jessica stood in the command center, breathing hard, sweat beading on her forehead as the operation collapsed around her. Her earpiece buzzed with overlapping voices, reporting failures across the simulation zone. "Fall back to Checkpoint 3, she ordered, but no one seemed to know where Checkpoint 3 was located anymore. That's when a voice cut through the chaos. Clear, commanding, precise. "Team Delta, move to Building 37. Clear the north stairwell and establish a defensive position on the second floor." It wasn't Jessica's voice. Marines in the command center looked up to see Rachel standing at the entrance. No uniform, no tactical gear, just that same leather bag in her hand. But her voice carried absolute authority. She pointed at the digital map displayed on the main screen. "Team Alpha, your route is compromised. Redirect through the market square, hug the eastern wall, and approach from the blind spot at coordinate 42. A Marine near the communication station hesitated. "Who authorized you to speak?" Rachel didn't answer. She stepped forward, her eyes scanning the tactical display with frightening precision. "Team Bravo," she said, looking at the group trapped on the rooftop. "You have an extraction point 3 meters northeast. The building next door has a collapsed section. Cross over, descend through the interior, and rendezvous with Team Charlie at the original insertion point." They moved. Even Jessica froze, watching this civilian take command of her operation. Rachel leaned over the map, recalculating positions with swift efficiency. She traced routes with her finger, identifying vulnerabilities and opportunities that everyone else had missed. The hostage simulation is using a standard pattern. They've positioned counter-snipers here, here, and here. She marked 3 points on the map. Your approach is predictable. If you continue, the scenario ends with 80% casualties and mission failure. Quote. She looked up, her gaze sweeping across the shocked faces around her. "I can get your people out with the hostages, but you follow my lead exactly, or this operation fails completely." No one argued. Something in her tone, her presence, made argument impossible. For the next 22 minutes, Rachel orchestrated a complete turnaround. Her commands were precise, strategic, flawless. She redirected teams, identified weaknesses in the enemy simulation, and created extraction pathways where none seemed to exist. And for the first time in Camp Lejeune's Special Training Division history, a hostage extraction simulation ended with 0 casualties, all hostages rescued, and perfect tactical execution. The debriefing room was packed beyond capacity. Marines stood shoulder to shoulder. Instructors whispered in corners, and everyone's eyes kept flicking to the command screen, which still displayed the final successful extraction footage. Commander Reynolds stepped to the front, clearing his throat. "Before we proceed, one question needs answering." He looked directly at Rachel. "Who took operational control of that mission?" Silence stretched like a drawn bowstring. Then Rachel stepped forward, quietly, calmly. "I did, sir," she said simply. The reaction was immediate. Heads turned. Some gasped, others stared in disbelief. This was the same woman they'd mocked hours earlier, the civilian they'd driven from the training ground. Reynolds studied her intently. "You're not on our roster. You're not staff. Explain yourself." Rachel didn't blink. She stood with her arms relaxed at her sides, her voice perfectly even. "My name is Rachel Cortez. I served 12 years in the Marine Corps, Force Recon. I held the rank of captain with the 2nd Reconnaissance Battalion through 4 high-risk deployments." The room went dead silent. No shuffling, no whispers, nothing. "I resigned 5 years ago after a failed extraction mission that cost lives," she continued, her voice never wavering, "including my entire squad. I haven't worn a uniform since." An instructor near the back took a slow, shaky breath. A young Marine lowered his gaze, suddenly unable to meet Rachel's eyes. "I didn't come here to lead," Rachel said, looking around the room. "I came as a consultant to observe your new simulation technology. But when your operation fell apart, I did what I was trained to do. I gave direction, you followed it. We completed the mission." Simple, honest, Undeniable. That's when they heard it. The low thud of helicopter rotors, distant but growing louder. Outside, dust began swirling across the landing pad as an unscheduled military helicopter descended, its arrival shaking the very foundation of the camp. The helicopter door slid open, boots hit the ground with military precision, and then, stepping into full view, came Colonel James Mercer. Silver eagles gleamed on his shoulders. His steel-gray eyes surveyed the scene, and every step he took radiated absolute authority. The Marines stared. The instructors froze. Mercer walked past the line of stunned officers, heading straight toward the debriefing room with singular purpose. He entered, stopped 3 feet from Rachel, and did something that shattered every assumption in the room. He saluted her. A clean, sharp, respectful military salute. Rachel returned it without hesitation, muscle memory taking over. Gasps rippled through the room like electricity. Jessica Winters shrank back into the crowd, her face pale with shock. Mercer turned to address the room, his voice carrying easily without being raised. An hour ago, I received multiple reports regarding an incident at this facility. Reports of targeted harassment, public humiliation, and disrespect directed at a civilian visitor. He paused, his gaze sweeping the silent crowd. A woman, a former officer, a decorated Marine. Another pause. And one of the most accomplished force recon operators this Corps has ever produced. The room went tomb silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the polished floor. Colonel Mercer continued, his voice steady but carrying an edge that made everyone stand a little straighter. What you witnessed today wasn't luck or coincidence. Captain Cortez led one of the most successful hostage extraction teams in Marine Corps history. Her unit rescued 37 civilians from impossible situations across 3 continents. Her tactical innovations are still taught at Quantico. His gaze found Jessica in the crowd. She tried to shrink further back, but there was nowhere to hide. While you were mocking her boots, Mercer said, you failed to notice their standard-issue force recon, modified for desert operations. Those old boots have walked through terrain that would break most of the footwear in this room. He turned to Commander Reynolds. I want a full investigation. Names, footage, witness statements. Anyone involved in the harassment of Captain Cortez will face immediate disciplinary action. Jessica stepped forward desperately. Colonel, Mercer raised his hand, cutting her off. Lieutenant Winters, you lost control of your operation. You failed to maintain unit cohesion, and you participated in the public degradation of a decorated veteran. His voice didn't rise, but it filled every corner of the room. Your temporary suspension begins immediately. Your family connections won't help you here. Jessica's mouth opened, then closed. Her perfect uniform suddenly seemed to hang wrong on her frame. Her confidence completely evaporated. Mercer faced the room again. This division is supposed to train elite operators. Real Marines don't lead through inherited rank or expensive equipment. They lead through competence, through earning respect, through proving themselves under pressure. He looked back at Rachel, who had remained perfectly composed throughout the confrontation. She didn't ask for command today, she earned it. When your mission collapsed, she stepped up, because that's what real Marines do. They serve, even when no one asks them to. Commander Reynolds spoke up, his voice firm. All privileges will be reviewed. Training access will be suspended for those involved. Performance evaluations will be delayed pending investigation. The Marine who had poured water on Rachel's boots sat down heavily, his hands trembling slightly. The one who'd filmed her with his phone had already deleted the video. Across the room, an instructor removed her tactical headset, unable to look anyone in the eye. Rachel simply stood there, not triumphant, not smug, just steady. She'd been through real battles with real consequences. This was just another day. Mercer turned to her one more time. Headquarters wants you back, he said quietly. They've been watching. Your country needs operators like you again. Rachel shook her head with a faint smile. I'm done with combat, James. I just came to consult on the simulation technology. He nodded once, understanding completely. Outside, the sky had cleared, the dust settled. Inside the debriefing room, for the first time all day, no one questioned who belonged and who didn't. As the crowd began to disperse, the full weight of what had happened settled over the Special Training Division like a heavy fog. Word spread quickly through the barracks, the mess hall, every corner of the base. The woman they'd mocked wasn't just any veteran. She was one of the most decorated force recon operators of her generation. The civilian they had humiliated had more combat experience than their entire division combined. Rachel gathered her simple leather messenger bag, preparing to leave, when several Marines approached. Not the ones who had mocked her. They had scattered like leaves in the wind. These were others who had watched the whole thing unfold with growing unease. "Ma'am," one young Marine said quietly, "I wanted to apologize. Not everyone here agreed with what happened to you today." Rachel looked at him, really looked. She saw something in his eyes that reminded her of the Marines she used to command. "What's your name?" "Private First Class Thomas Wilson, ma'am." "I'm here on merit, worked my way up from nothing." She nodded. "There are good people here, Wilson. Don't let today make you think otherwise. But remember, real strength doesn't need to prove itself by tearing others down." A few more Marines gathered, asking quiet questions about leadership, about service, about what it really meant to wear the uniform. Rachel answered each one thoughtfully, her voice gentle but authoritative. Commander Reynolds approached as the informal gathering wound down. He held out a folder. "The training division has a proposal," he said. "Guest instructor position, 3 months. These Marines could learn something valuable from you." Rachel took the folder but didn't open it. "They need to learn how to listen first," she said. "How to respect people regardless of what they're wearing or where they come from. Would you be willing to address that issue first?" Rachel looked around the facility one more time, at the expensive equipment, the polished surfaces, the privilege that seemed to coat everything like a glossy veneer. Then she looked at the few Marines still standing nearby, the ones with genuine curiosity in their eyes, instead of entitled arrogance. "I'll consider it," she said finally. Later that evening, Jessica Winters packed her belongings in her private quarters. Her temporary suspension meant immediate reassignment to administrative duties. Her father's frantic calls to headquarters had gone unanswered. She found herself thinking about Rachel's silence, her composure, the way she had commanded respect without demanding it. Everything Jessica had been taught about power and influence had crumbled in a single afternoon. As the sun set over Camp Lejeune, Rachel walked toward the gate where Mark was waiting by their rental car. Her worn boots brushed against the concrete path. Her messenger bag shifted on her shoulder. Behind her, she could feel eyes watching, not with mockery this time, but with something approaching understanding. Some of them were finally beginning to learn what she'd known all along. You don't need a perfect uniform to be respected. You just need to earn it. 3 weeks later, Rachel Cortez returned to Camp Lejeune. This time, she wore the same combat boots, now cleaned and polished, still bearing the scars of countless missions. She carried herself with the quiet authority that had always been there. The transformation in the Special Training Division was remarkable. Word of the incident had spread through military circles like wildfire. Suddenly, the division's reputation for producing entitled operators had become a liability rather than a point of pride. New protocols were in place. Respect and merit-based evaluation replaced the old system of family connections and superficial standards. Several Marines had been reassigned, others were on probation, and the entire culture was shifting. Rachel's first class was small. 12 Marines who had specifically requested to learn from her. Private Wilson was there, along with others who had shown genuine interest in becoming real leaders rather than just wearing the uniform. Leadership, she began, standing in front of a simple tactical board, isn't about the loudest voice in the room. It's not about the most expensive gear or the most impressive family name. She wrote 3 words on the board: listen, adapt, overcome. Real leaders listen more than they speak. They observe before they act. They understand that respect is earned through competence and character, not demanded through rank or connections. A young female Marine raised her hand. "Ma'am, how do you stay so calm under pressure?" Rachel smiled slightly. "I've learned that panic is contagious, but so is composure. When you know who you are and what you're capable of, other people's opinions become background noise." After the class, Commander Reynolds found her in the hallway. "Early reports are promising," he said. "The Marines who remain seem different, more focused on substance than appearance." "Good," Rachel replied. "They're learning that being a Marine isn't about looking the part, it's about being worthy of the title." Quote, As she walked across the compound toward her car, Rachel noticed changes everywhere, Marines working together regardless of their backgrounds, instructors focusing on skill development rather than social connections. The expensive gear was still there, but it no longer seemed to matter as much. Near the gate, she passed a group of new recruits going through basic orientation. They looked nervous, excited, unsure of themselves, the way young Marines should look before they learn what they're truly capable of. One of them, a young woman about the same age Rachel had been when she first enlisted, caught her eye. There was something familiar in her expression, a hunger to prove herself, to serve something bigger than her own ambition. Rachel nodded to her as she passed. The young woman straightened unconsciously, sensing something significant in that simple gesture of acknowledgement. Getting into her car, Rachel reflected on how strange life could be. She'd come to Camp Lejeune as a consultant, ended up as an instructor, and somehow found a new purpose in the process. Her phone buzzed with a text from James. "You're changing lives over there." She typed back, "Just teaching them what you taught me years ago, that real strength doesn't need to announce itself." As she drove away from Camp Lejeune for the day, Rachel Cortez, former captain, current instructor, and forever Marine, smiled quietly to herself. She'd learned long ago that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply be yourself, stand your ground, and let your actions speak louder than anyone else's words. The young recruit at the gate was still watching her car disappear down the road, something stirring in her chest that felt like possibility, like potential, like the beginning of understanding what it really meant to serve. And Rachel knew that the real victory wasn't in the humiliation of those who had mocked her. It was in the inspiration of those who would carry forward the lessons of true leadership, true service, and true strength. 2 months into her guest instructor position, Rachel was preparing for a routine training exercise when the base alarm blared to life. This wasn't a drill or simulation. The sharp, pulsing rhythm signaled a real emergency. Commander Reynolds burst into the classroom, his face tense. "Cortez, we need you. Now." Quote. Within minutes, Rachel found herself in the command center, staring at satellite imagery of a small fishing vessel adrift in international waters, approximately 70 miles offshore. "Civilian boat, engine failure, drifting into a dangerous shipping lane," Reynolds explained quickly. "Coast Guard is tied up with a massive rescue operation up north. We've been asked to assist." Rachel scanned the weather report. Storm system moving in. 6-foot swells, increasing. "It gets worse," Reynolds continued. "Intelligence suggests there's a criminal element operating in that sector. Smugglers, possibly armed. 3 Marines were dispatched for initial assessment in a small craft, but we've lost contact." Rachel's eyes narrowed. "Lost contact how?" "Last transmission reported approaching the vessel. Then nothing. That was 40 minutes ago." The room fell silent. Everyone knew what this meant. A routine rescue mission had potentially become something far more dangerous. "Who did you send?" Rachel asked, her voice perfectly calm. Reynolds hesitated. "Lieutenant Winters led the team." Rachel's head snapped up. Jessica Winters, the same officer who had humiliated her, now potentially in serious danger. "Her suspension was lifted last week," Reynolds explained. "She requested the assignment specifically, wanted to prove herself." Rachel nodded once, already calculating distances and options. "I need a helicopter, full tactical gear, and 2 volunteers." "This isn't your responsibility, Cortez," Reynolds said quietly. "You're an instructor now, not an active operator." Rachel was already moving toward the door. 3 Marines are out there. That makes it my responsibility." Private Wilson stepped forward immediately. "I volunteer, ma'am." A second Marine, Staff Sergeant Miller, one of the few who hadn't participated in the mockery weeks earlier, joined him. "Count me in." 20 minutes later, Rachel was airborne in a UH-1Y Venom helicopter, dressed in tactical gear that felt both foreign and familiar against her skin. Her old combat boots, now properly waterproofed, completed the uniform she'd sworn she'd never wear again. "Last known coordinates put them here," the pilot said, pointing to a blinking dot on the navigation screen. "But with the current and wind, they could have drifted miles by now." Rachel studied the map, her mind racing through scenarios. "Drop altitude. We need to search a grid pattern starting from their last transmission point." Quote, "For nearly an hour, they scanned the choppy waters below, visibility decreasing as the storm system moved closer. Private Wilson, manning the starboard observation position, suddenly stiffened. "Contact, 2 o'clock, approximately 800 meters." Rachel moved to his position, grabbing binoculars. Through the growing mist, she could make out the fishing vessel, rocking violently in the worsening seas. Next to it, barely visible, was the smaller marine craft, appearing damaged and listing to one side. "No visible movement on deck," she reported. "Prepare for insertion." The pilot's voice crackled through the headset. "Weather's deteriorating fast, Captain. We've got maybe 20 minutes before this becomes too dangerous for hover operations." "Understood. Put us in position." As the helicopter moved into hover position above the fishing vessel, Rachel made a rapid assessment. The marine craft had clearly collided with the larger boat, suggesting a confrontation rather than an accident. No personnel were visible on either vessel. "Fast rope insertion," she ordered. "Wilson, you're with me. Miller, provide cover from the helicopter. If we're not back in 15 minutes, you extract and report." The rope dropped, and Rachel descended first, her boots hitting the slippery deck with practiced precision. Wilson followed seconds later, his landing less graceful but effective. The fishing vessel was eerily quiet, the only sounds coming from the creaking hull and the increasingly aggressive waves slapping against the sides. "Clear the deck," Rachel commanded, her voice low but carrying over the wind. "I'll take point." They moved methodically across the open area, weapons ready. The boat was larger than it had appeared from above, a commercial fishing vessel that had seen better days, but with surprisingly modern navigation equipment visible through the wheelhouse windows. "Inconsistent," Rachel muttered. "Old boat, new tech." They reached a hatch leading below deck. Rachel signaled Wilson to provide cover as she prepared to descend. "If anything happens," she said calmly, "your priority is getting those Marines out." "Understood?" "Yes, ma'am," Wilson replied, his young face set with determination despite the fear visible in his eyes. Rachel disappeared below deck, moving silently through the narrow passageway. The interior of the vessel told a different story than its weathered exterior. Sophisticated communications equipment lined one wall, and crates of unmarked supplies filled a storage area. A muffled sound caught her attention, coming from behind a closed door at the end of the corridor. She approached cautiously, listening intently before easing the door open. The sight that greeted her confirmed her worst fears. 3 Marines, including Jessica Winters, sat bound and gagged in a small storage room. 2 armed men stood guard, their weapons trained on the captives. Rachel assessed the situation in seconds. Direct confrontation would endanger the hostages. She needed a distraction. Retreating silently, she returned to Wilson on deck. 3 Marines captive, 2 armed guards. Probable smuggling operation, she reported. "I need you to create a distraction on the port side while I enter from starboard." The plan formulated quickly. Using emergency flares from their gear, Wilson would create the impression of Coast Guard arrival from one direction while Rachel infiltrated from the other. "You have 3 minutes after the first flare," Rachel instructed, "then move to position near the main hatch for extraction support." The storm was intensifying, the deck pitching more violently with each passing minute. The helicopter hovered at a safe distance, waiting for the signal. "Ready?" Rachel asked. Wilson nodded, fear and determination battling in his expression. "Remember your training," she said simply. "You can do this." The first flare shot into the darkening sky, blazing red against the storm clouds. Almost immediately, movement erupted on the vessel as one of the armed guards emerged on deck to investigate. Rachel slipped below again, using the distraction to approach the storage room from a different angle. She could hear confused shouting from above. Wilson was executing his part perfectly. The remaining guard was alert but distracted, his attention divided between his captives and the commotion above. Rachel moved like a shadow, closing the distance before he could react. The takedown was swift and silent. Years of training took over as she neutralized the threat without firing a shot, a precision chokehold rendering him unconscious within seconds. Jessica's eyes widened in recognition as Rachel quickly moved to free the captives. "Extraction point is the main deck," Rachel instructed as she cut through their restraints. "Helicopter standing by. Move fast, stay low." The second guard was returning. They could hear his footsteps approaching rapidly. Rachel positioned herself by the door, motioning for the freed Marines to stay back. As he entered, confusion momentarily crossed his face, just long enough for Rachel to strike. The confrontation was brief but intense, ending with the guards subdued and secured. "Clear," Rachel announced. "Move now." Leading the group back to the deck, they emerged into the full fury of the storm. Rain lashed across the vessel, and the deck pitched dangerously. "Helicopter inbound," Wilson reported, appearing from his position with remarkable composure for a Marine who had just executed his first real tactical operation. The extraction wouldn't be easy. The worsening conditions made hover operations extremely dangerous, and the vessel's violent movement complicated pickup. "We'll extract by rescue basket," Rachel decided, most injured first. One of the Marines had sustained a shoulder wound during their initial capture. Rachel supervised as he was secured in the rescue basket and hoisted to the helicopter. Jessica approached her as they prepared the second Marine for extraction. "Why?" she asked, having to shout over the storm. "Why would you risk your life for us, after what I did?" Rachel continued working as she answered. "Because that's what Marines do. We don't leave our people behind, even the ones who pour water on our boots." There was no time for further conversation. The second Marine was away, and Wilson was next. "You go," Rachel told Jessica. "I'll take the last basket." Jessica shook her head. "That's not protocol. As ranking officer present, I should." "This isn't about rank," Rachel cut her off. "It's about getting everyone home. Go." Something in Rachel's tone brooked no argument. Jessica nodded and moved to the extraction point. As the basket descended for the final time, Rachel scanned the vessel one last time. The evidence of smuggling operations would need to be reported, but that was a concern for later. Right now, her mission was nearly complete. The helicopter pilot's urgent voice crackled through her radio. "Captain, we're reaching operational limits. Need to extract now." Rachel moved to the basket, but a sudden violent wave crashed over the deck, sending her sliding toward the edge. She caught herself on a railing, but the basket swung out of reach. From above, she could see the panic on the faces watching from the helicopter. The pilot was struggling to maintain position in the deteriorating conditions. Rachel assessed the situation with lightning speed. The basket swung wildly just beyond her reach. The helicopter fighting against the storm to maintain position. This wasn't just about her survival anymore. If the pilot kept trying to hold position in these conditions, the entire aircraft would be at risk. She made her decision in an instant. Raising her hand to her radio, she spoke with perfect clarity despite the chaos around her. "Extract now. I'll find alternative transport." Through the rain, she could see Jessica's face in the helicopter door, eyes wide with disbelief. "We are not leaving you!" Jessica's voice cracked through the radio. Rachel's response was calm but firm. 5 lives against 1. Basic math. The vessel is damaged but still floating. I'll weather the storm and call for extraction after it passes. Private Wilson's voice joined the exchange. "Captain, we can try one more approach." "Negative. Storm's intensifying. Make the right call, not the emotional one." There was a moment of silence, then the pilot's reluctant acknowledgement. "Understood, Captain. We'll send immediate rescue once weather permits." Rachel watched as the helicopter veered away, disappearing into the storm clouds. Alone on the fishing vessel, she quickly assessed her situation. The boat was taking on water, but not critically. The navigation equipment was still functional, and she had dealt with worse, much worse, during her time in Force Recon. She made her way to the wheelhouse, examining the systems. The engine was indeed damaged, but potentially repairable. The radio equipment was sophisticated, not standard for a fishing boat, confirming her suspicions about the vessel's true purpose. As she worked to establish communication with the mainland, the full force of the storm hit. Waves crashed over the deck, and the boat pitched violently in the churning sea. But Rachel remained focused, her hands steady as she repaired damaged wiring in the radio system. After 20 minutes of meticulous work, a crackle of static rewarded her efforts. "Mayday, Mayday. This is Captain Rachel Cortez, USMC, aboard disabled vessel approximately 65 miles offshore, requesting emergency assistance." The response was immediate but broken by static. "Receiving you. Position. Coast Guard. Hours." Rachel calculated quickly. The Coast Guard wouldn't risk rescue operations in these conditions. She was on her own until the storm passed, likely several hours. Moving methodically through the vessel, she located emergency supplies, secured loose equipment that could become dangerous in the rolling seas, and found the source of the water leakage, a damaged seam in the hull that she temporarily patched with materials from the storage area. As she worked, Rachel's mind remained clear, focused on survival rather than fear. This was what separated trained operators from others, the ability to function under extreme pressure, to make rational decisions when everything around you was chaos. Hours passed. The storm showed no signs of abating. The temporary patch was holding, but the vessel continued to take on water, albeit slowly. Rachel established a pumping system using equipment she found aboard, working tirelessly to keep the flooding contained. In the brief moments between urgent tasks, her thoughts drifted to the faces she had seen in the helicopter, especially Jessica Winters, the woman who had mocked her, humiliated her, and then been rescued by her. Rachel wondered if the experience would change anything in the lieutenant's perspective. Dawn broke with the storm finally beginning to subside. Rachel, exhausted but alert, had maintained the vessel's stability through the night. The radio crackled with clearer communications now. Coast Guard rescue was en route, ETA 40 minutes. As she waited on the slick deck, scanning the brightening horizon for signs of rescue, Rachel reflected on the strange path that had brought her here. From decorated Marine captain to civilian consultant to reluctant hero, all because she had walked onto a base wearing old combat boots that sparked ridicule. The distinctive thrum of helicopter rotors pulled her from her thoughts, but it wasn't Coast Guard colors that appeared through the breaking clouds. It was a Marine Corps helicopter. And as it neared, she could make out a figure standing in the open door, the unmistakable silhouette of Jessica Winters. The rescue operation was textbook perfect. Within minutes, Rachel was aboard the helicopter. A thermal blanket wrapped around her shoulders despite her protests that she was fine. Jessica sat across from her, studying her with an expression Rachel couldn't quite decipher. Command said Coast Guard was handling the extraction, Rachel said, raising her voice above the helicopter noise. Jessica's response was direct. I overrode that decision. On what authority? Quote, None, Jessica admitted. I requisitioned the helicopter claiming urgent operational necessity. Rachel's eyebrows raised slightly. That's a court-martial offense. So is abandoning a Marine. Jessica held her gaze steadily. Even one who isn't active duty anymore. The remainder of the flight passed in silence, both women lost in their own thoughts as the coastline came into view. Rachel had expected to be taken to the nearest medical facility, but the helicopter headed directly back to Camp Lejeune. As they touched down on the landing pad, Rachel was surprised to see a substantial welcoming committee, Commander Reynolds, Colonel Mercer, and what appeared to be the entire class of Marines she had been instructing. The moment the rotors began to slow, Private Wilson broke ranks and rushed forward, followed closely by the other Marines who had clearly been waiting anxiously for news. Captain, you made it! Wilson's face was split with relief. Rachel stepped down from the helicopter, still wrapped in the thermal blanket, despite the warm morning sun. Takes more than a storm to stop a Marine, Wilson. Colonel Mercer approached, his expression a mixture of relief and exasperation. Captain Cortez, you were supposed to be teaching classroom sessions on tactical theory, not conducting live rescue operations in international waters. Sorry, sir. Classroom got boring. A hint of a smile cracked through Mercer's professional demeanor. 3 Marines alive because of you, hard to argue with those results. Commander Reynolds joined them. The intelligence you gathered about the vessel is already being processed. Appears to be part of a larger smuggling network we've been tracking for months. Rachel nodded, but her attention was drawn to Jessica, who stood slightly apart from the group, her posture rigid, her expression unreadable. If you'll excuse me, Rachel said, moving away from the officers toward the lieutenant. Jessica straightened as Rachel approached, looking as though she expected a reprimand. Instead, Rachel simply asked, Why did you come back for me? Jessica's composure faltered momentarily. Because you came for us, when you had every reason not to. That's the job. No, Jessica shook her head firmly. That's who you are. There's a difference. Before Rachel could respond, Jessica continued, her words coming faster now, as if she needed to get them out before courage failed her. I've spent my entire career trying to prove I belong here, that I earned my rank. That I'm not just here because my father is a general. She met Rachel's eyes directly. I thought respect came from the uniform, from the rank, from making sure everyone knew exactly who I was and what power I had. Rachel remained silent, letting her speak. Then you walk in wearing those damn boots, no uniform, no rank, and command more respect in 5 minutes than I have in 5 years. Jessica's voice caught slightly. How do you do that? Rachel considered her answer carefully. Respect isn't given because of what you wear or what your father does. It's earned through your actions when everything is falling apart. When people are watching to see who you really are under pressure. She gestured toward the helicopter. Out there, when it mattered, you made the right call. You came back for a fellow Marine. That earns respect. Jessica processed this, then nodded slowly. I've been doing this all wrong, haven't I? Not all wrong, Rachel said. Just backward. You tried to demand respect first and earn it second. Reverse that order, and you'll be surprised at the results. Their conversation was interrupted by a medical team arriving to check Rachel over, despite her continued insistence that she was fine. As she was led away, Jessica called after her. Captain Cortez, your boots! Rachel looked down at her combat boots, now soaked with seawater and bearing new scars from the night's ordeal. They held up pretty well, didn't they? She said with a slight smile. Jessica nodded. Yes, ma'am, they certainly did. The news of Rachel's rescue operation spread through Camp Lejeune like wildfire. By afternoon, the story had reached headquarters, and by evening, it had evolved into the stuff of legend. How a former force recon captain weathered a Category 2 storm alone on a damaged smuggling vessel after ensuring every other Marine made it to safety. Rachel endured the medical checkup with stoic patience, answering questions automatically while her mind processed the events of the past 24 hours. She was exhausted but satisfied. The mission had been completed successfully. Everyone had come home. Commander Reynolds found her as she was being discharged from the medical center. Headquarters is buzzing, he said without preamble. Joint Chiefs got wind of what happened. Rachel sighed. It was a straightforward extraction that got complicated by weather. Nothing special. Reynolds shook his head. 3 Marines alive who would likely be dead. Intelligence on a smuggling operation we've been trying to crack for months. And an object lesson in leadership that nobody on this base will ever forget. I'd say that's something special. He handed her a folder, different from the one he'd given her weeks earlier. What's this? She asked, not opening it. New proposal. Not just guest instructor. Full reinstatement, rank of major, with posting to the Special Training Division as head of the new Advanced Tactical Leadership Program. Rachel stared at the folder. I told Colonel Mercer I was done. That was before you jumped on a helicopter at the first sign of Marines in trouble, Reynolds pointed out. Actions speak louder than words, Captain. And yours are shouting that you're not nearly as done as you think you are. Rachel took the folder but still didn't open it. I need time to think about it. Take all the time you need, Reynolds said, but you should know, every Marine in that helicopter has already requested transfer to whatever unit you end up commanding. That evening, Rachel sat alone in her temporary quarters, the unopened folder on the table before her. Her still damp boots stood by the door, battle-scarred but serviceable, just like her. She had walked away from the Corps 5 years ago for good reasons. The failed mission that cost her entire squad had left scars deeper than any visible on her boots. She had sworn never to put herself in the position of being responsible for others' lives again. Yet here she was, being offered exactly that responsibility. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Private Wilson standing there, looking uncomfortable but determined. Private? Something wrong? No, ma'am. Just... He hesitated, then seemed to find his resolve. The guys and I wanted you to have this. He held out a small wooden box. Rachel took it, raising an eyebrow questioningly. It's from all of us, the ones you took into that simulation when it was falling apart, and the ones you taught afterward. Rachel opened the box. Inside lay a set of captain's bars, polished to a high shine. We know you already have these, Wilson said quickly, but we wanted you to have a set from us, because of what you taught us. Rachel looked up at him. Which is what, exactly? Wilson stood a little straighter. That it's not about the rank or the gear, it's about who you are when it matters. What you do when no one's watching. How you treat people who can't do anything for you. His words echoing her own lessons back to her, struck something deep inside Rachel. "Thank you, Private. This means a lot." After Wilson left, Rachel returned to her contemplation of the folder. The captain's bars sat beside it now, gleaming in the soft light. She thought about the young Marines she'd been teaching, about Jessica Winters and her struggle to understand true leadership, about the 3 Marines who had come home safely because she happened to be there when they needed her. Perhaps, she thought, there were different ways to serve, different ways to honor the memory of those she had lost. Her phone buzzed with a text from Colonel Mercer. "Whatever you decide, you've already made a difference here." Rachel smiled slightly. She hadn't given her answer yet, but somehow she suspected Mercer already knew what it would be. The next morning, Rachel walked across the parade ground toward the command building, her decision made. Her combat boots, now cleaned and dried but still bearing the marks of her recent adventure, carried her forward with purpose. Marines she passed stopped to salute, not because protocol demanded it, but out of genuine respect. She returned each salute with precision, acknowledging the gesture for what it was. Near the training fields, she spotted Jessica Winters leading a group of new recruits through basic drills. The lieutenant looked different somehow. Her posture was the same, her uniform just as immaculate, but her approach with the recruits had changed. She was instructing rather than commanding, guiding rather than demanding. Jessica noticed Rachel watching and nodded once. A simple gesture of acknowledgement and respect between equals. Rachel returned the nod before continuing on her way. Commander Reynolds was waiting in his office, attempting to look as though he wasn't anxiously anticipating her arrival. Rachel placed the folder on his desk, now open with the papers inside signed. "Major Cortez," he said, breaking into a rare smile. "Welcome back to the Corps." "Thank you, sir. I have some ideas for the new training program." "I'm all ears." "First," Rachel said, "we need to address the culture. Real operators aren't built by giving them the fanciest gear or drilling them until they can recite the manual. They're built by teaching them to think, to adapt, to lead from wherever they stand in the formation." Reynolds nodded. "Couldn't agree more. What else?" "I want to incorporate crisis simulation scenarios, not just tactical challenges, but ethical ones. Situations where there isn't a clear right answer in the manual. Like deciding whether to stay with a damaged vessel or risk a helicopter crew in a storm." Reynolds asked with a knowing look. Rachel smiled slightly. "Something like that." They spent the next hour outlining the framework for the new Advanced Tactical Leadership Program. Rachel's vision was comprehensive, combining the technical skills of force recon with the ethical foundation and decision-making processes that turned good Marines into great leaders. As they wrapped up, Reynolds asked one final question. "What made you decide to accept the position?" Rachel considered her answer carefully. "Something Private Wilson said. He reminded me that we teach more by what we do than what we say." She paused. "If I truly believe in the kind of leadership I've been teaching, then I need to demonstrate it, not just talk about it from the sidelines." Later that day, Rachel stood at the edge of the training field watching a group of Marines running drills. These were the future of the Corps. Some would rise through the ranks, others would serve honorably and return to civilian life, but all would carry with them the lessons they learned here. A young female recruit caught her eye, the same one she had nodded to weeks earlier. The young woman was struggling with a particular maneuver, growing visibly frustrated as her teammates moved ahead. Rachel approached quietly, observing for a moment before speaking. "Plant your right foot first, then pivot from the hip rather than the knee." The recruit started, then quickly came to attention. "Yes, ma'am." "At ease," Rachel said. "Try it again." The young woman followed Rachel's instruction, executing the movement perfectly this time. "Thank you, ma'am," she said, a smile breaking through her serious expression. "What's your name, recruit?" "Martinez, ma'am. Sophia Martinez." Rachel nodded. "Good work, Martinez. Keep it up." As Rachel turned to leave, Martinez called after her, "Ma'am? Are you the one they call combat boots?" Rachel paused, surprised. "Excuse me?" Martinez flushed slightly. "Sorry, ma'am. There's a story going around about an officer who saved 3 Marines during a storm. They call her combat boots because of something that happened her first day here." Rachel couldn't help but laugh. "Is that what they're calling me now?" Yes, ma'am. Everyone says you're the real deal, that you show what it really means to be a Marine. Rachel looked down at her battered boots, then back at the earnest young recruit. It's not about the boots, Martinez. Remember that. It's about what you do while wearing them. Martinez nodded seriously. Yes, ma'am. As Rachel walked away, she reflected on how strange life's paths could be. She had returned to Camp Lejeune as an outsider, mocked for her worn boots and civilian status. Now those same boots had become something of a legend, and she was responsible for shaping the next generation of Marine leaders. Her phone buzzed with a message from Colonel Mercer. Joint Chiefs approved your program proposal. Full implementation effective immediately. Congratulations, Major. Rachel smiled as she typed her response. Tell them I'll need new boots. These have a few too many stories to tell. She looked back across the training field, where Martinez was now helping another recruit master the maneuver Rachel had just taught her. That was how it worked. Knowledge passed on, lessons shared, each Marine lifting up the next. And as the sun set over Camp Lejeune, Major Rachel Cortez, once mocked for her old combat boots, stood tall in the knowledge that sometimes the greatest leadership moments came not from grand gestures or heroic rescues, but from simply being who you are, standing your ground, and showing others the way forward through your actions. The legend of combat boots would grow, stories embellished with each telling, but the truth was far more powerful than any legend. That real strength comes from within, that true respect must be earned, and that sometimes the most important step you can take is the one that brings you back to where you belong. 6 months into her role as head of the Advanced Tactical Leadership Program, Major Rachel Cortez stood at the edge of the observation platform, overlooking the most ambitious training exercise Camp Lejeune had seen in decades. Below her, scattered across the sprawling simulation zone, 60 Marines navigated a complex scenario involving hostage rescue, intelligence gathering, and extraction under enemy fire, all with minimal equipment and constantly changing parameters. This wasn't standard training. There were no script cards, no predetermined outcomes, no safety nets. The Marines had to adapt, communicate, and lead from wherever they found themselves when crisis struck. Impressive, Colonel Mercer said, joining her at the railing. Headquarters is calling it the most innovative training protocol they've seen in 20 years. Rachel nodded, her eyes tracking a small team as they improvised a diversion using only the materials they had on hand. They're learning. Your approval ratings are through the roof. Every division wants your graduates. Rachel smiled slightly. They're not learning how to follow a checklist, James. They're learning how to think. Below them, Lieutenant Jessica Winters was leading one of the teams. Gone was the polished perfection and rigid command style. In its place was something more authentic. A leader who communicated clearly, listened to her team, and adapted to changing circumstances with confident flexibility. Winters has come a long way, Mercer observed, following Rachel's gaze. She always had the potential. She just needed to understand where real leadership comes from. Rachel's radio crackled with a status update from the field. The exercise was reaching its critical phase, teams converging on the extraction point while managing multiple competing priorities. This was where leadership was truly tested, when competing goods forced difficult decisions. Major Cortez? A young lieutenant approached, saluting crisply. There's an urgent call for you in the command center. Rachel frowned. She had given strict instructions not to be interrupted during the exercise unless it was a genuine emergency. What is it, Lieutenant? General Harlow, ma'am. He says it's regarding Operation Kingfisher. Rachel's expression didn't change, but Mercer, who knew her well, caught the subtle shift in her posture. Operation Kingfisher was the code name for the failed mission 5 years ago, the one that had cost Rachel her squad and driven her from the Corps. I'll take it, she said, her voice perfectly controlled. Colonel, can you oversee the remainder of the exercise? Of course. In the command center, Rachel picked up the secure line, aware of the curious glances from the communications staff. General Harlow wasn't just any general. He was the head of Joint Special Operations Command, one of the most powerful figures in the military hierarchy. This is Major Cortez. Major, thank you for taking my call. Harlow's voice was exactly as she remembered it. Direct, authoritative, no wasted words. I'll get straight to the point. We've located Santiago. Rachel's hand tightened on the receiver. Alejandro Santiago, the target of Operation Kingfisher 5 years ago, the man whose escape had cost 8 Marines their lives, her people. Where? She asked, her voice steady despite the surge of emotions. Venezuela, remote compound in the northern mountains. We have recent satellite confirmation and human intelligence on the ground. Rachel processed this information, her tactical mind already working through implications. Why are you telling me this, sir? Because I'm putting together a task force to bring him in, and I want you to lead it. The request hung in the air between them. Rachel closed her eyes briefly, memories flooding back. The ambush, the firefight, the desperate calls for extraction that never came, watching her people fall one by one. With all due respect, sir, I'm not in field operations anymore. I run a training program. I'm aware of your current posting, Major. I'm also aware that 6 months ago you single-handedly rescued 3 Marines from armed hostiles in the middle of a Category 2 storm. Harlow paused. Santiago was responsible for the deaths of your entire squad. Don't tell me you don't want to be part of bringing him to justice. Rachel chose her next words carefully. This sounds like you're offering me a revenge mission, General. I'm offering you closure, Major, and the opportunity to complete what your team started 5 years ago. His tone softened slightly. The intelligence package is being sent to you now. Review it, then give me your answer. After the call ended, Rachel sat motionless at the communications station, her mind a swirl of conflicting thoughts. The intelligence officer discreetly placed a sealed folder on the desk beside her, then withdrew without a word. Rachel stared at the folder, knowing that opening it would mean confronting ghosts she had worked hard to put behind her. Santiago wasn't just a target. He was the embodiment of her greatest failure as a leader. Hours later, as twilight settled over Camp Lejeune, Rachel sat alone in her office. The contents of the intelligence package spread across her desk: satellite images, surveillance photos, intelligence reports, all confirming what Harlow had told her. Santiago was alive, operating with impunity, and responsible for a growing network of weapons and human trafficking across 3 continents. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She quickly gathered the classified materials as Commander Reynolds entered. The exercise concluded successfully, he reported. Your teams performed exceptionally well, especially Winter's group. Rachel nodded, only half listening. Reynolds studied her face. Something wrong, Major? For a moment, Rachel considered keeping the Santiago situation to herself. But if the past 6 months had taught her anything, it was the value of trusted counsel. I've been offered a field operation, she said finally. High-value target extraction in hostile territory. Reynolds raised an eyebrow. That's outside your current mandate. It's Santiago. The name hung in the air between them. Reynolds knew the story. Everyone in special operations did. The mission that went catastrophically wrong. The target who got away. The team that never came home. Harlow wants you specifically, Reynolds guessed. Yes. And you're considering it. Rachel spread her hands over the intelligence materials. These people died because of a mission I led, John. Because we didn't get Santiago when we had the chance. Reynolds took a seat across from her desk. Those people died because intelligence was compromised. Extraction was delayed. And Santiago had twice the force's intelligence suggested. None of that was on you. I was in command. Everything that happens is on me. So what's your plan? Take the mission as some kind of redemption quest? Rachel's eyes flashed. This isn't about redemption. Isn't it? Reynolds challenged. You've spent 6 months teaching these Marines that leadership isn't about ego or proving yourself. It's about making the right decision for the right reasons. He gestured toward the intelligence materials. Is that what this is? The question hit home. Rachel leaned back in her chair, considering his words. If you take this mission for personal reasons, Reynolds continued, what message does that send to the people you've been training? Especially people like Winters, who are just starting to understand what real leadership looks like. Rachel was silent for a long moment. Then she gathered the intelligence materials and returned them to the folder. You're right, she said finally. I need to think this through carefully. Quote, later that evening, Rachel walked the perimeter of the training grounds, the night air cool against her skin. The base was quiet at this hour, most Marines either in the barracks or off-duty in town. It gave her space to think, to weigh options without interruption. The memory of her fallen squad was never far from her thoughts. Their faces, their names, their stories. She carried them with her always. Would bringing Santiago to justice finally lay those ghosts to rest? Or was Reynolds right? Was she seeking personal redemption at the expense of what she'd been building here? Her wandering brought her to the memorial garden, a quiet space dedicated to Marines who had fallen in service. She hadn't planned to come here, but perhaps some part of her had been drawn to this place of remembrance. To her surprise, someone else was already there, a solitary figure standing before the newest memorial stone. As Rachel approached, she recognized Jessica Winters, still in her field uniform from the day's exercise. Jessica turned at the sound of footsteps, then straightened when she saw who it was. "Major!" "At ease, Lieutenant. This isn't an official visit." Jessica relaxed slightly but remained respectful. "I didn't expect to see anyone else here this late." Rachel moved to stand beside her, looking at the memorial stone Jessica had been contemplating. It bore the names of Marines lost in a helicopter crash 2 years earlier, before Rachel's return to the Corps. "Did you know them?" Rachel asked quietly. "My brother was the pilot," Jessica replied, her voice steady but with an undercurrent of controlled emotion. "Lieutenant Commander David Winters." Understanding dawned on Rachel. Jessica's drive, her need to prove herself, her initial arrogance, all took on new dimensions with this revelation. "I'm sorry for your loss," Rachel said simply. Jessica nodded. "He was everything I wasn't. Natural leader, respected by everyone, earned everything he achieved." She paused. "After he died, I felt this pressure to live up to his legacy, to be worthy of the name." Rachel understood that pressure all too well, the weight of expectations, the fear of failure, the desperate need to prove oneself. "Is that why you reacted so strongly when I first arrived? Someone who didn't fit your image of what a Marine should be?" Jessica looked away, embarrassment coloring her features. "I was taught that respect comes from appearance, from rank, from projection of authority. You undermined everything I thought I knew." She met Rachel's eyes directly. "And then you saved my life when you had every reason to let me face the consequences of my mistakes." Rachel shook her head. "That's not how it works." "I know that now," Jessica gestured toward the training grounds. "What you've been teaching us, it's changed everything. How I lead, how I think about command, how I measure success." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, each lost in her own thoughts. "May I ask you something, Major?" Jessica finally said. "Go ahead." "The mission where you lost your squad, does it still haunt you?" The directness of the question caught Rachel off guard, but she appreciated the honesty behind it. "Every day," she admitted. "Not because we failed, but because I couldn't bring them home." Jessica nodded slowly. "My brother's crash was ruled mechanical failure, but I've always wondered if there was something he could have done differently, some decision he could have made that would have saved them all." "That's the burden of command," Rachel said quietly. "You carry every outcome, good or bad. How do you bear it?" Rachel considered the question carefully, by remembering that leadership isn't about being perfect. It's about making the best decisions you can with the information you have, taking responsibility for the outcomes, and learning from every experience, especially the painful ones. Jessica absorbed this, then asked, "If you had the chance to go back to complete that mission the right way, would you take it?" The question struck directly at the dilemma Rachel had been wrestling with since Harlow's call. Would she take the Santiago mission if offered? Should she? "I don't know," she answered honestly. "Part of me wants that closure, but another part knows that going back isn't always the way forward." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. Private Wilson appeared, slightly out of breath. "Major Cortez, I've been looking everywhere for you. Colonel Mercer needs you at the command center immediately." "What's happened?" 3 Marines on night training exercise haven't reported in. Last communication indicated possible hostile contact near the eastern boundary. Rachel was already moving. "Winters, with me. Wilson, alert the QRF and have them standing by." Minutes later, Rachel strode into the command center, where Mercer and Reynolds were studying a tactical map. "What's the situation?" she demanded. Mercer looked up, his expression grave. Training squad led by Sergeant Martinez encountered unidentified armed individuals while conducting night navigation exercise. Last transmission indicated they were being pursued. No contact in the past 40 minutes. Rachel processed this information quickly. Martinez. Is that Sofia Martinez? Yes, recently promoted. She had 2 privates with her, Adams and Nguyen. Rachel studied the map, identifying the last known position and likely routes. These aren't standard training grounds. What were they doing out there? Martinez requested permission to use more challenging terrain for advanced night navigation training, Reynolds explained. Given her exemplary record, I approved it. Rachel nodded. Sofia Martinez had become one of her most promising trainees, determined, intelligent, and a natural leader. If she was in trouble, there was no time to waste. I need a helicopter ready in 5 minutes. Small extraction team, myself, Winters, and 2 volunteers. Already arranged, Mercer said. But Major, there's something else you should know. He handed her a preliminary intelligence report. Local law enforcement has been tracking a smuggling operation in that area. The description of the armed individuals matches Santiago's known associates. Rachel felt the blood drain from her face. Santiago, here? Unlikely it's him personally, but possibly his network. We've detected unusual shipping activity along the coast this past week that fits their pattern. The coincidence was too striking to ignore. Just hours after being offered the Santiago mission, his organization might have inadvertently encountered her Marines. This changes nothing about our immediate priorities, Rachel said firmly. We find our people and bring them home. Everything else is secondary. Within minutes, Rachel was aboard a helicopter with Lieutenant Winters and 2 experienced Marines from the Quick Reaction Force. As they lifted off, Rachel briefed the team on what they knew, which wasn't much. Last known position puts them here, she indicated on the tactical map. Heavily wooded area, minimal infrastructure, poor visibility. If they are evading pursuit, they'll seek high ground with cover. There's an abandoned fire tower in that sector, one of the QRF Marines offered. Good defensive position, clear sight lines. Rachel nodded. That's our first search point. Winters, you'll coordinate with base while we're on the ground. I want constant communication. If we locate hostile forces, we observe and report before engaging. The helicopter cut through the night sky, infrared sensors scanning the terrain below for any sign of movement. Rachel checked her weapon and equipment methodically, her mind focused entirely on the mission. Jessica watched her, then asked quietly, Is this connected to Santiago? Rachel met her gaze steadily. Possibly, but that doesn't change our objective. Understood, Major. As they approached the search area, the pilot reduced altitude, hovering just above the tree line. No visible heat signatures matching human profiles in the immediate vicinity, he reported. We'll need to widen the search pattern. Rachel was about to respond when the radio crackled with an incoming transmission, faint and broken, but unmistakably urgent. Under fire, Eastern Ridge, requesting immediate. Static consumed the rest of the message. That's Martinez, Rachel confirmed. Pilot, vector northeast toward the ridge line. Prepare for hot insertion. The helicopter banked sharply, accelerating toward the coordinates. Through the night vision goggles, Rachel could now make out brief flashes of light in the distance, gunfire. Set down 200 meters south of the engagement, she ordered. We'll approach on foot, assess the situation, and extract our people. The insertion was textbook, smooth, silent, and fast. Within moments, Rachel's team was on the ground, moving through the dense forest toward the source of the gunfire, which had become sporadic but continued. As they drew closer, Rachel signaled for the team to spread out and advance with caution. Through the trees ahead, she could make out the silhouette of the fire tower one of her Marines had mentioned, and surrounding it, multiple armed figures taking cover behind vehicles and trees. Using hand signals, Rachel directed her team to encircle the position. She needed eyes on their Marines before deciding how to proceed. Crawling forward to a better vantage point, Rachel finally spotted what she was looking for. 3 figures in Marine combat gear, positioned defensively at the base of the tower. One appeared to be wounded, while the other 2 were returning fire with controlled, disciplined shots. Even from this distance, Rachel recognized Martinez's calm leadership under pressure. Rachel assessed the situation quickly. 8 hostiles, well armed, with superior position in numbers. A direct assault would be high risk. But the Marines were pinned down, one injured, with limited ammunition. She signaled Winters forward. Call in the QRF for backup. Then we create a diversion to draw fire away from our people." Jessica nodded, relaying the coordinates and situation to base. The QRF would be airborne in minutes, but Martinez and her team might not have that long. Rachel outlined her plan, a coordinated attack from multiple positions to confuse the hostiles about their numbers and location, creating an opportunity for Martinez to move her wounded comrade to better cover. "On my signal," Rachel instructed. 3, 2, 1. The forest erupted with controlled bursts of fire from Rachel's team, striking from 3 different positions. The hostiles, suddenly under attack from unexpected directions, scattered to find new cover. In the confusion, Rachel saw Martinez seize the opportunity, helping the wounded Marine toward the relative safety of a shallow ravine, while the third Marine provided covering fire. The diversion worked, but now the hostiles were regrouping, focusing their attention on the new threat. Rachel's position came under heavy fire, bullets splintering the trees around her. Through her comm unit, she heard Jessica's tense voice. "QRF, inbound, ETA 4 minutes." "May not have 4 minutes," Rachel responded, ducking as another burst of gunfire tore through the foliage above her. "Martinez status?" "Corporal Adams has a gunshot wound to the leg, but stable," Martinez's calm voice replied, "running low on ammunition. These aren't ordinary smugglers, Major. They're military trained." Rachel had already noted their tactical discipline. These weren't common criminals. They were professionals. Possibly the same type of professionals who had ambushed her squad 5 years ago. Making a split-second decision, Rachel changed positions, drawing fire away from Martinez's location. "Lieutenant Winters, circle west and link up with Martinez. Prepare for extraction. I'll keep them occupied." "Major, that's too exposed." "That's an order, Lieutenant." Rachel moved with practiced efficiency, using the terrain to her advantage as she created the impression of multiple attackers. It was a dangerous gambit, but it was working. The hostiles were dividing their attention, becoming disorganized. Then she saw him, a figure moving between vehicles, directing the others with authoritative gestures. Through her night vision, she could make out his features clearly enough to recognize him from the intelligence photos she'd studied for years. Not Santiago himself, but his right-hand man, Diego Vasquez, the same man who had been present during the ambush that killed her squad. For a heartbeat, Rachel felt the pull of personal vengeance, the opportunity to capture one of the architects of her team's destruction. Vasquez was less than 50 meters away, momentarily exposed. But then her radio crackled with Martinez's voice. "Adams is losing blood fast. Need immediate extraction." In that moment, clarity washed over Rachel. This wasn't about Santiago or Vasquez or settling old scores. It was about the 3 young Marines who needed to come home. "QRF, this is Major Cortez. We have a Marine down, requiring immediate medical evacuation. I'm marking our position now." Rachel activated an infrared beacon, visible to the approaching helicopter but not to the hostiles. Then she pushed forward, laying down, covering fire to protect Martinez's position. The sound of helicopter rotors grew louder, and suddenly the forest was bathed in the powerful searchlight from the QRF chopper. The hostiles scattered, retreating toward their vehicles as Rachel's team closed ranks around Martinez and the wounded Adams. As the helicopter touched down in a small clearing, Rachel supervised the loading of the wounded Marine, ensuring everyone was aboard before taking one last look at the retreating hostiles. Vasquez was among them, escaping once again. But as the helicopter lifted off, carrying all of her Marines to safety, Rachel felt no regret about the choice she had made. Some ghosts weren't meant to be confronted directly. They were laid to rest through the choices that defined who you truly were. Back at base, as medical teams took charge of Corporal Adams, Rachel found herself surrounded by her team. Martinez, looking exhausted but proud. Winters, her uniform muddied but her eyes clear with new understanding. The QRF Marines who had responded without hesitation to their comrades' need. Colonel Mercer approached, his expression a mixture of relief and concern. "All accounted for, Major." "All accounted for, sir. Adams will recover." "And the hostiles?" "Definitely connected to Santiago's organization. Vasquez was leading them." Mercer's eyebrows rose. "Vasquez himself? Here?" Quote. Rachel nodded. "They're getting bolder, operating this close to a major military installation." "This changes things." Mercer studied her face. "Harlow will want to know." "I'll brief him myself," Rachel said. "But not tonight. Tonight is about our people coming home." As the adrenaline of the operation began to fade, Rachel found herself standing alone near the landing pad, watching the medical team transfer Adams to the base hospital. Martinez approached, still in her dirt-stained combat gear. "Thank you for coming for us, Major," she said simply. Rachel looked at the young sergeant, no longer the uncertain recruit she had first encountered, but a capable leader who had kept her team alive against overwhelming odds. "You did well out there, Martinez. Kept your head, protected your people." Martinez nodded, then hesitated before asking. One of them seemed different. Giving orders, better equipped. The others deferred to him. "Vasquez," Rachel confirmed. "Santiago's second in command." Recognition flashed in Martinez's eyes. "From your previous mission, the one where—" "Yes." Martinez absorbed this. "You could have gone after him. I saw you had the shot." Rachel met her gaze steadily. "There was a Marine bleeding out who needed extraction. No contest." A look of understanding passed between them. Mentor and student, leader and leader, Marine and Marine. "Get some rest, Sergeant," Rachel said. "Debriefing at 0800. As Martinez walked away, Colonel Mercer rejoined Rachel at the landing pad. "Harlow called again while you were out there," he said without preamble. "Santiago's operation is expanding. Tonight proves they're operating in our backyard now." Rachel nodded, watching as the last of the medical team disappeared into the hospital building. "He still wants you for the mission," Mercer continued. "Said to tell you that it's not about the past anymore. It's about stopping Santiago before more people get hurt." Rachel considered this, thinking about the choice she had made in the forest. Mission over vengeance, people over the past. "Tell General Harlow I'll take the mission," she said finally, "but on one condition." "Which is?" Rachel turned to face him fully. "I choose my team, and we do this the right way. Not as a revenge mission, but as professionals bringing a dangerous criminal to justice." Mercer nodded slowly. "He'll agree to that." "One more thing," Rachel added. "Lieutenant Winters goes with me." "Winters?" Mercer looked surprised. "After everything that happened between you?" "Especially because of that," Rachel said. "She's learned what real leadership means. Now she needs to put it into practice." As dawn broke over Camp Lejeune, Rachel stood in the empty training field, her old combat boots firmly planted on the ground that had become her home again. The boots were scuffed and worn, bearing the marks of countless missions, training exercises, and rescues. Like her, they had stories to tell, of failure and redemption, of loss and renewal, of mockery turned to respect. In a few hours, she would begin assembling her team for the Santiago mission. It wouldn't be about settling old scores or laying ghosts to rest. It would be about doing the job right, protecting others from harm, and bringing her people home safely. Because that's what leaders did. That's what she had been teaching all along. A Marine approached from the direction of the barracks. Private Wilson, looking nervous but determined. "Major Cortez, word is you're putting together a team for a special operation." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "News travels fast." "Yes, ma'am." Wilson straightened his posture. "I'd like to volunteer." "It's a high-risk mission, Private, not a training exercise." "I understand that, ma'am." His expression was earnest. "But you taught us that real Marines step up when they're needed, regardless of the danger. I want to be that kind of Marine." Rachel studied him. No longer the uncertain young man she had first encountered, but a soldier who understood what service truly meant. "Report to the briefing room at 0900, she said finally. "We'll see what you're made of." As Wilson hurried away, Rachel took one last look around the training field where her journey had begun 6 months earlier, where she had stood in these same boots, enduring mockery and dismissal, never imagining the path that lay ahead. The morning sun glinted off the buildings of Camp Lejeune, and somewhere in the distance, the sound of Marines beginning their daily training echoed across the compound. Life went on, the mission continued, and leaders led not through rank or uniform or fancy equipment, but through the power of their example. Rachel Cortez adjusted her worn combat boots and turned toward the command center, ready for whatever challenge came next, not because she had something to prove, but because this was who she was. A Marine, a leader, a teacher, and these old boots still had many miles left to walk. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.